Welcome to the Strong Starts podcast with your hosts, Jessica Whitehead and Sarah Gerber-Kai.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Strong Starts podcast. Today we're going to be talking about play and incorporating more play into your teaching strategies, into your classrooms. And Jessica, this is an interesting one. I think we've actually tried to talk about this on the podcast a couple different times, and it's been a little tricky to do, mostly because a lot of the barriers to incorporating more play into the classroom don't have anything to do with the teachers themselves. Teachers generally know that this is good for kids, know the research and the science behind it. And it's really more of the systems that are set up that become the biggest barrier.
Yeah, if you don't know the science behind how play benefits the brain, those creative moments that kids need to have, you can do a Google search and pretty much find any research you want to support the fact that kids need to move, play, be creative, and have those opportunities throughout the day, even in the classroom. And sometimes the biggest barrier is our system. Let's face it, adults make some dumb rules for kids. But one of the reasons we're seeing problem behavior is because we talked about in our past episode about the system and schools just not being for students.
Right.
Really. And we talked about that compliance piece before.
Compliance is the antithesis of play. And we know that the developing brain learns through play, through having choice and that creativity. And so then if you have a system that's built on compliance that's really in opposition to that, you're going to see all these problem behaviors communicating, hey, this isn't right. This isn't working.
Yeah. So if we want to see students be able to access learning and the way their brain works and the way they're built, we have to be able to incorporate more play and more opportunities for that creativity during the school day.
Well, yeah. And I mean, we're also seeing the problem behavior. I think we talked about this a little bit because the learning just isn't fun. It's not engaging. It's not, like you've said before, if you're not having fun as the teacher, your kids definitely don't like being there either. So incorporating play also helps address problem behavior just by being more engaging. But in general, our systems are not set up to support teachers, and teachers generally know even how to make this happen, I think, about how to make play happen. And it just isn't happening because of the way that our master schedules are set up for schools, the demands for instructional minutes. There's a lot of different demands placed on teachers that get in the way of this.
Well, and I think sometimes we also become our own barrier in education because we feel so discouraged. We know our kids need to be going out to recess. We know all these things need to happen, but we also have these huge pressures placed on us for academic achievement, making sure we meet instructional minutes. We're bound by a contract time that doesn't even make sense.
Yes. No. And it becomes a bit crazy making because I even start to second guess it. I'm like, wait a minute, am I just wrong? Are worksheets the best for kids?
Well, we see so dang many of them. I mean, I was guilty in the classroom teacher. It's part of, you get them as part of your curriculum. And pretty soon you're passing out worksheet and workbook all day long. And, the kids got to play because they went out to recess. That doesn't hardly even count. That's 15, 20 minutes if we're lucky, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the first things that gets cut. And money is obviously a barrier too. Sometimes, materials cost money. We talk, when you look at some of the ways to incorporate play, someone's going to try to sell you on some program with some materials that are very expensive, and that's cost prohibitive. Sometimes it feels like, well, I don't have the adults in the room to be able to help support it because play seems chaotic. I think that goes a little bit, though, to what you're saying about sometimes the barriers ourselves. But that could certainly be a barrier in and of itself, is the money, the time.
Money, the time, sometimes just being told no, by an administrator. And there's a lot of us out there that have really supportive administrators and administration at the district level. And there's some that, they struggle getting that support to be creative with their time during the day. And it's not always their fault either. There's pressures put on principals to have their schedules made a certain way or meet so many minutes. And even at the district level, they have pressures on them from laws and policymakers and people who aren't even in education or have never stepped foot in a classroom are making these decisions. And, a lot of this is tied to funding. And so districts are tied to certain funding models and, requirements for instruction and school days. And, sometimes that pressure is then put on teachers
Yeah.
and to make sure these things get done. Sometimes teachers feel like, and not just teachers, staff, all staff feel like their creativity has just been like squashed. This is how you're going to teach and this is what you're going to do. And then we try to get through the day.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, Jessica, we could probably talk for a full hour on all the ways that the system kind of crushes that creativity, can become soul crushing. But what if you can't change that system? Because truthfully, that's a lot of what it's going to come down to. And, as all the teachers that I've talked to can see the bigger picture on this. I've never met a teacher who didn't understand this and understand what it is that kids needed and knew they were able to talk to the barriers that keep them from being able to use those practices in their classroom. We can't change that system. Sometimes we can't change it. We could certainly influence it, but we can't change it. So when we can't change the system, what do we do?
Well, and you're right. Ideally, we want to change the system. That is our ultimate goal. When we talk about strong starts, we want to set that foundation for kids at the systems level. But sometimes that doesn't work. And sometimes while we're waiting for the system to change, we have to be the systemic change within our own classroom, our own setting, and where we can still, follow along with the mission and vision of the school district, because ultimately we're employees and we can, follow the directions given to us by administration while harnessing our own creativity and doing what we know is best for students in our classroom.
Well, yeah. So let's dig into that because you can get pretty creative within the restrictions that are placed on you.
Yes. And if you don't have your people, find your people. I know a lot of us have great teaching partners, great colleagues. Sometimes, though, there are teachers and staff members out there that feel alone. They feel like they're on their own island. I'm the only BCBA in our whole district, so I don't have another one. So sometimes I have that feeling, but you have to find your people. Sarah is one of my people, and I have other people that I rely on. And if you're a staff member out there, just find your people. Ask, talk, beg if you need to. Is anyone out there also struggling with this? It might not be your grade level, but to me, that's step one. Find people who are willing to go on this journey with you and struggle with you and maybe break some rules with you.
Well, and you're going to be surprised. You will find people because this kind of leads into what I'd like to say is step two, but you're backed by science on this. Like, trust your expertise in this area because the science is all saying, yes, this is how developing brains learn is through play. So you will find other people. This isn't like hidden knowledge. There are going to be other people who know about this and who have that same drive to make it happen as you do. So yes, sometimes you have to get creative. Sometimes you have to look outside your own district. Sometimes you might even have to look, on the internet to find people who are doing the work that you want to be doing and be able to collaborate with them long distance, but you will find people. You're not on the wrong track with this.
No, and it's your responsibility to find your people. So if you're sitting there and waiting for the system to change for you, waiting for someone to tell you what to do, it's time for you to do that on your own. You're an adult, you're a professional. If you want something done, do it. We're also not advocating for this like huge rise and, complete anarchy either.
We're not.
We don't want you to get fired. We'd like you to follow the district policies and district rules. And so just disclaimer, please don't go to work and be like, oh, I listened to the Strong Starts podcast and they told me that I can overthrow the government. But do what you can within the system you have. And it might just be pushing some barriers a little bit, but really you do have to follow procedure. Yes. Now that I've given that disclaimer. Now that I've actually said that out loud to cover my butt, I can say other things.
Hold on a second. Because, yes, and you got to know what the actual barrier is. Because sometimes, through the culture and climate of the place you're working, things get passed around and just assumed to be fact when they're not. So know your policies, read the board policies, know what education law says, know what labor law says, because that's where you'll be able to get creative. I mean, there's so many, there's some great TikTok reels out there of social workers and other therapists who get really creative when they're writing their case notes because for those of you who know, you have to, prove medical necessity or prove that you're aligned to a treatment plan with whatever it is that you're doing in a session with a client. But, at the end of the day, you also have this ethical duty to give the client what it is that they need. So you got to get real creative with those notes sometimes. to be able to capture the craziness of what happens. But you do what you need to do in a session because it's what's good for the person. At the end of the day, we got to do what's good for people.
Yeah. And being creative within policy can be tricky, but you can pretty much tie so many things to an academic social emotional standard. I mean, if you're going to start, also keep in mind that anything you start is going to have to be taught and worked through with your kids. If you just pull out random board games and just let them have at it, it'll be like Lord of the Flies happening, in your classroom, and no one wants that. But if you're thinking, okay, eventually I would like the students to be able to play a board game or design something through this meaningful interaction, collaborate and work together, you're going to have to set up a structure for that. So one way I used to do that, no matter what age, is I'd start with Candyland. Candyland it doesn't matter how old you are, but learning how to move on a game board. Kids don't play games that much anymore at home. And so also dealing with that frustration tolerance, because if you've played, you know that when you have to go back to the beginning, it is very hard to handle.
Yeah, it's heavy.
Yes, especially when you gotten so close, the place at the top, the gumdrop mansion or whatever it is. So just teaching them how to interact socially through a game that doesn't have not content based is going to be helpful. And so start setting up those collaboration structures, how we respond to each other, how to manage that trash talking that's going to happen no matter what. But yeah, starting with a game that you can use to teach them some of those skills is going to be helpful.
Well, and you brought up a good point. Maybe your bread and butter is your relationships with your families, with your community, with the parents of the kids. And so maybe that's where you decide to start, is you decide to start with, I'm just going to talk to families more about playing. Play has steadily decreased in homes. Kids aren't having just that free play. Kids aren't playing board games and learning all the skills that way. So maybe you're just talking with families, you're shifting the conversations to, hey, let's what are some ways your kids can get out and play? And here are all the benefits to it. And let's collaborate on that level. So that's another place to start too, if that's where your passion really lies.
Yeah, the cut and play is not just at schools. It's just everywhere.
It is.
And it
wild.
Sucks. Yes. It's crazy to me that it's so hard to find, even for my own kids, to find time during the week to just get outside and play or, do something creative, because they're bound by so many things. And, homework's one of them, and school demands. But yeah, if we can talk to families about it, we can find these ways to set up that structure in the classroom. Those are going to be our first steps.
So if we could leave you guys with one thing, it would be a challenge. To start with, find that one worksheet, that one assignment this upcoming week that you're planning on giving, and incorporate some play into it.
Yes, take it. Can you take that really boring worksheet and can you cut it up? And each group have a different section of the worksheet, and then they make a presentation out of that section. Can you gamify it in any way? Make it a trivia, put it on, Kahoot, Gimkit, Blookit, whatever game platform you have. Is there something that can be designed? Is there more open-ended questions that causes a little more critical thinking? Is there a way that we can, have a circle of discussion around that worksheet? So finding a way to take that boring paper that kids would just be sitting and putting pencil to paper to, and make it a little more thought-provoking and something that enhances creativity.
I absolutely love that. And then notice the results, notice the impact, because this is what's going to drive you to do it again if you want to get some momentum. And this is also where you could start to make some systems impact. So notice the impact just for yourself, for your own edification of wow, students were more engaged this time. They enjoyed it. Maybe you even give them an exit ticket so that you can see what it is that they learned or enjoyed from that process. And then that's what's going to end up starting some of those conversations with other people about this work that you did. Hey, I did this one thing. I tried this one thing this week, and this was the result, and I'm really into it.
Yeah, and know that you're going to have different behavior, and your classroom's going to look different when you do these things. So if you're the person who likes the control, the peace and quiet of kids sitting down independently working on a worksheet, that will change as you implement more fun, creative activities. So, you're going to have to be okay with the change in volume in your classroom, the amount of movement in your classroom. Teach that explicitly, and also just keep an eye out for this and make sure it's organized chaos because If it's not organized chaos and your room is, disruptive, you're not going to want to do it anymore. So, create that environment where you feel good about it, the kids feel good about it, and it's something you want to tell others about.
I love that. Being very strategic and picking the one thing that you decide to challenge yourself with this week. Well, on that note, thank you all so much for listening. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us at Strong Starts Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Bye, everybody.
Bye.